Okay. Hello, and welcome everybody to the Developing North Carolina's Energy Workforce webinar, and thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Alex Glenn, and I'll be your guide for today's webinar. So this is the last of 3 webinars this year that we're hosting as part of our Exploring NC Smart Grid project. And the goal of this ongoing webinar series is to share information on how grid modernization is influencing North Carolina's future. If you've missed any one of our previous webinars from the past couple of years, you can visit our project website, ncsmartgrid.org, and check out the recordings and valuable resources that we have there. So, my name is Alex Glenn, and I'm an energy consultant and training specialist with Advanced Energy. I've worked in the energy efficiency and clean tech industry for 15 years, and I'm happy to be your host and facilitator for today's webinar. We have a great lineup of content that we're excited to share, but before we dive in, I want to cover a few quick housekeeping items with everyone. First, if at any point you'd like to interact with our speakers, please submit your questions or comments in the Q&A box in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. We'll respond to as many of your questions as we can at the end during our Q&A session. If you have a question for a specific speaker, please be sure to include their name in your comment so we can make sure that they can address it either at the end of the webinar or afterwards. If we don't have time to address in the Q&A session, we can reach out to you specifically. As a reminder, this webinar is being recorded and will be available on the ncsmartgrid.org website, and we'll send out a follow-up email so that you can watch a link to the webinar recording afterwards, or share that with your colleagues. Finally, throughout the presentation, we will launch a couple of poll questions to gather your input, so please keep an eye out for those and share your feedback with us. Today, we're pleased to have Ann Randazzo, LaTanya King, and Margaret Robertson join us as we explore workforce development in North Carolina. Ann is the Executive Director of the Center for Energy Workforce Development. The center is a consortium of national energy associations, electric and natural gas energy companies, and is solely focused on addressing the workforce needs of the energy industry. LaTanya is the Director of Workforce Planning and Development for Duke Energy. She's responsible for ensuring the company has the right talent necessary to lead the transformation of the energy industry. And Margaret is Associate Vice President of Workforce Continuing Education at the North Carolina Community College System. And she has more than 15 years of experience collaborating with colleges and employers to impact workforce education opportunities. Thank you all for joining us today. And on tap for today, our guest speakers will each take a turn exploring some great content. Ann will lead us through some strategic workforce planning and help us with some of the game changers in the energy industry. LaTanya will then come online to help us with Duke Energy's workforce development framework and explain about how they're building the talent pipeline through work-based learning, and give us an overview of the Carolinas Energy Workforce Consortium. And then finally, we'll have Margaret lead us through what is going on with North Carolina's community college system and some of the sector partnerships in action. At the end, I'll provide us a quick summary of today's highlights, and we'll facilitate a Q&A session for each of you to ask your questions, offer any comments that you might have for our guest speakers today. So, to get us started and to lead into our first guest speaker, we're going to launch our first poll question of the webinar. So this is for every one of you who are joining us and is on the line today, all right, so that we can learn a little bit more about you and what's going on with workforce development and training efforts where you work. So the question is, how would you best describe the workforce development and training effort at your workplace? What do you know about it? Are you in the beginning stages of workforce development and training? Or are you making progress with implementation of some steps or an action plan? Or do you have some advanced systems in place and robust strategies that are working for you. And of course, if you don't know or you're not certain, you can select that question, that answer as well. So I'll ask everybody on the line, go ahead and select the best answer to how would you describe the workforce development and training efforts at your workplace. All right. So we've got some answers coming in here. It looks like a good many of you are making progress with workforce development and training efforts or have some advanced systems already in place. A couple of more seconds and we will close the poll and broadcast the results. All right. Let's go ahead and do that. And thanks, everyone. I really think that gives us a good sense of where you're coming from, and it'll help some of our guest speakers direct their talking points today. All right, so we've got almost a tie for making progress with implementation and advanced systems in place. Some of you don't know or you're not certain, and that's completely okay. We will cover a lot of content today, and so let's move forward here with our first guest speaker of the day and transition into her content. Anne is our first guest speaker, Executive Director of the Center of Energy Workforce Development. And the center is, as I said earlier, a consortium of national energy associations, electric and natural gas energy companies, and they are solely focused on addressing the workforce needs of the energy industry on a national scale. And Anne has spoken on energy industry workforce needs in numerous national, regional, and state forums. And she's been instrumental in creating the Get Into Energy career pathways model that's been adopted by the industry. She's going to tell us a little bit more about that. Anne's going to provide us insight into strategic workforce planning efforts and some of the game changers in the energy industry. I'll ask Anne to come off mute, and I'll pass the microphone to you now, Anne.
Great. Thank you, Alex, and welcome, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with you today and to talk about CEWD and some of the strategic workforce planning efforts that we have available. I wanted to give you just a quick update on CEWD. We are a national organization, as Alex mentioned. We cover the entire United States with our members who are made up of electric and natural gas utilities, the major trade associations, contractors, and educational institutions, along with government agencies like Workforce Systems and others. So the idea is that we function very much like a smart grid, making connections all across the country between those entities, students, job seekers, and others who are interested in the energy industry. Our goal is to work together to create this next generation of the energy workforce. And we have moved in untold numbers of ways since we were started in 2006. You see a few of our brands on the slide: Energy Industry Fundamentals, a basic energy education unit. We have a national energy education network that I'll show you a little bit more about. Get Into Energy is our national career awareness brand, and Troops to Energy Jobs is an effort that we have pulled together with companies all over the country to focus on how to bring military veterans into these great jobs. When you start thinking about workforce development, the first piece of it is strategic workforce planning. And what is that? We learned early on, and it has become kind of a mantra for us, that first you make a plan. And some of you are in the beginning stages, as we saw in the poll, some of you more advanced. But wherever you are, if you're going to embark in workforce development efforts, you need to have a plan. What does that mean? It means this is the way that we have defined it, but looking at the things that are going on around you, whether it's at the national level, the state level, within your company or organization, and understanding how the things that are happening around you will impact the workforce. That's that first red quadrant. We call it workforce strategy. And then once you know that, what do the numbers look like? What does the data tell you? Where are you now in terms of your workforce, and how do you move towards the future to be able to implement the strategies? The third piece is where most of us focus our time and energy, and that's actually the work that's out externally, building a workforce pipeline in the educational institutions and other places, or internally with technical training and much of the work that happens to take existing employees and move them along their career pathways. And then finally, how do you know if you're making any progress? What are the results? How do you know that what you're doing is working? We start with a national strategic workforce plan. We call it the Game Changers. We've been doing this for many years now. And if you take a look at the changes that are happening in the industry, what we've identified is some of them are external to our company, some of them are internal to our companies. And we've been tracking this, as I said, for several years. The Game Changers document, the strategic workforce plan that we did in 2018, showed much more significant change, though, than we've seen in the past. We saw very significant differences in both the external and the internal game changers. You'll see that they're noted in red. And what they show is that we're seeing a shift to an energy industry that's transforming with technology, and technology playing an increasingly a more important role in everything that we do. We also see that the energy industry, the workforce that we currently have, is changing with a younger and more diverse workforce. And that's increasingly digitally literate. That's a good thing. So as the industry is changing towards more technology, so is our workforce. We have an increasing number of young employees who grew up in the digital age, and so that's helpful. This particular workforce, this transitioning workforce, along with all the advances in education technology, can position us to meet the challenges for the future. What we have seen is that as we have this continued move towards a more digitized electric and natural gas infrastructure, more smart technology, whether it's installed systems or the customer systems, what that means is that our skills are changing. The type of people that we're looking for in the future have to be able to adapt and change. The work is changing. When you look at enabling technologies, and those are things that we can, whether it's AI or chatbots or whatever it happens to be, those technologies are changing the way that we do business. They're changing our jobs, because as we get more, as we become more technically advanced, what that means is we have, from the infrastructure modernization that's going on, from a lot of these changes that are happening with generation, we have more data. We have the ability in the future to analyze and work with that data. It changes the jobs. Our customers are expecting us to be able to provide different services, and all of that coupled together with the changes that are happening internally with this transitioning workforce means that we have to look at our workforce needs for the future in a different way than we have in the past. So what does that mean for our workforce? We have identified critical jobs, and this is a risk grid that we put together looking at some of those. And for every one of those game changers, we look at what does it do in terms of the size of a job category, like technicians or engineers, and what's the impact in terms of skills. And the areas that you see in red are the ones that we've identified as changing at a more rapid pace than others. One of the things that's very different about our this risk map that we put together this year is we saw an increasing change in the size and the skills that are needed to support jobs. Why? It goes back to those game changers, because technology is changing many of the jobs that are internal to the companies at a faster rate than it is those in the field. I think one of the other interesting things when you look at those game changers and you look at the impact on the jobs is that almost to a job, what we see is that the workforce itself mirrors the changes that are happening in the industry. So as the size of the industry increases with more people out in the field working in different types of companies in a more decentralized energy infrastructure, our workforce is mirroring that same capacity. So looking at contractors and people that we bring in to provide specialized services is also an area that's changing significantly. What does all this have in common, though, and how do you take this kind of rapid change that's happening in the industry and our workforce and make sense of it in terms of workforce development? Well, one of the things that we know is that everybody is different, every state's different, every company is different, and people are at different places along this risk map as well as with the game changers. But the thing we know for certain is that people coming into the industry still need basic skills. They need traditional skills like employability skills and others so that they can adapt and change with us. We need a workforce that can come in with critical thinking skills, problem-solving skills, regardless of what job you move into, because we know that those jobs are going to be changing. So the idea behind this is the way that we have put together our workforce development process, which is building on traditional skills, employability skills, and then adding to that with some of these more specific ones. What does it mean in terms of, think about jumping to that next box, what does it mean in terms of our industry? You've probably heard a lot about the retirements in our industry. That was true when we started in 2006. This comes from our most recent survey that we're just pulling together now. And what you can see is that age curve is almost flat, which is what we've been working towards since we started. We want to have as many people coming in as are leaving. We want to have a much more normalized curve. The one that's in blue is where we started, where we saw this mountain of people that had the potential to retire. We're a little bit past that now. Now what we're looking at is not about the people who are leaving because of retirement. We're looking at the skills that are needed for the people coming into the industry and reskilling and upskilling the people that are already here. So when you take the next step and think about, okay, we have some data, and we have lots more, by the way, within our gap survey. It takes the information all the way down to a state level to begin to look at what the initiatives are that are needed. You can see that we are changing as an industry. Our workforce is changing. We are in a much more normalized kind of state when it comes to the people that we're keeping and the people that are leaving. What do you do about all of this? We think that one of the best solutions is State Energy Workforce Consortium, where everybody works together at a state level. LaTanya will talk a little bit more about that. But we look at how the different states operate, where they are in terms of those game changers, and then the workforce that's in that state and what's needed, and then work together to figure out what needs to happen, what educational programs need to be in place, and what does it look like in the future. This is our National Energy Education Network that I mentioned earlier. Each of our companies has an opportunity to partner with institutions of learning, whether we're talking about the secondary system, post-secondary, whatever it happens to be, and build partnerships to implement the types of programs that are necessary in that state. It's no coincidence, if you look at where the consortia are, that the partnerships are greater in those areas. Our National Energy Education Network is not only a partnership that's created, but out on our Get Into Energy website, as well as Troops to Energy Jobs, you'll find a Google map where you can link to each of these schools and directly into the programs that the companies and the educators have put together to meet those future needs. Remember that third quadrant, workforce development? This is where most of us live. And workforce development is not just about working within the educational institutions or to create that pipeline. Building the talent pipeline is a huge part of it, but it's also about recruiting and hiring from those programs, and then employee development and retention. We want to make sure that the people that we bring in stay, that they have very well-defined career pathways, that they change in terms of skills as the industry changes. You know, I talked about all of the ways that our jobs are going to change. Most of that work is done internally, and that's the focus on not just bringing people in, but keeping them and making sure that they are part of the industry going forward. So with that, LaTanya, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk more about what's happening in North Carolina.
Excellent. Actually, I'm going to jump in real quick before we go to LaTanya, Ann, and thank you so much for that broad overview of strategic workforce planning and some of the game changers in the energy industry. And we will be back with Ann in the Q&A session at the end. So folks, if you have questions or comments for Ann, please use the Q&A box at the top of the screen. Leave us a comment or a question that we can address at the session at the end. And so thanks. Let's keep the momentum moving forward and move towards our next guest speaker with LaTanya, who is the Director of Workforce Planning and Development for Duke Energy. LaTanya is responsible for ensuring that the company has the right talent necessary to lead the transformation of the energy industry, and she oversees and manages an ecosystem of strategies and interconnected programs and partnerships established with education, government, and community organizations to help build that pipeline of qualified, diverse talent for the company's most critical roles. And she's going to share Duke Energy's workforce development framework and some details about building that talent pipeline through work-based learning. So LaTanya, we'll bring you on now, and I'll hand the microphone off to you.
Thank you so much, Alex, and thanks also to Ann for her earlier remarks. I wanted to start by sharing a little bit about Duke Energy. We are a Fortune 150 company headquartered in Charlotte, North Carolina, and Duke is one of the largest electric utilities and holding companies in the U.S. We provide electricity to about 7.7 million retail electric customers in 6 states, and we provide gas, natural gas, to more than 1.6 million customers in 5 states. We also operate wind and solar power facilities in 14 states across the nation. Economic development in North Carolina is big for us. In 2018, Duke helped to attract about $2.4 billion in capital investments, and that equated to more than 4,300 jobs to the state. Duke Energy is working diligently to transform the customer's experiences, modernize the energy grid, generate cleaner energy, and to expand our natural gas infrastructure in order to create a smarter energy future for the people in the communities that we serve. Ann talked about the game changers earlier, and so our work around transforming the company to respond to those game changers is critical for us. This transformation that we're undergoing as a company does require a highly skilled and diverse workforce. Before we get into the details of that, I wanted to ask Alex to share with us this next poll question.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you, LaTanya. So let's find out. How much did the Duke Energy Foundation invest to support workforce education and training programs in North Carolina in 2019? So folks, everybody on the line, this is a quiz for you here. Take a guess, and if you know, select the best answer, select the right answer. If you know, how much money did Duke Energy Foundation invest? So you've got 2.5 million as an option, 7 million, 500,000, or 1.5 million. All right, a couple more seconds here, and we will close the poll here in just a second. Everybody get your vote in real quick. All right. So we'll go ahead and we'll close the poll and broadcast the results. Excellent. Thanks, everyone, for selecting an answer. And, well, LaTanya, let me pass the microphone back to you and ask that you share with us which one is the correct answer.
Thanks, Alex, and thanks everyone for participating. The polls are always fun to see kind of where people are landing, and 2.5 million is the right answer. So this was in 2019, earlier this year. We have a workforce development grant cycle, and we are very proud of that investment in workforce development. It is certainly going to create a lot of opportunity for my team to engage in order to build out this workforce. With this level of investment, we are wanting to make sure that we demonstrate the importance of workforce development at Duke Energy, and it's a priority for us. We want to ensure that our future employees have the skills necessary to support our company's strategy. So effective workforce development is a huge imperative for Duke Energy. And shared with you earlier a model, and that workforce development space is where many of us play in. And very specifically, I want to talk about what we're doing at Duke Energy from an external perspective in terms of workforce development. So these are the effective components of workforce development, again, externally focused, and this is around this interconnected set of programs and partnerships that we have in place with education, government, different community-based organizations that are keenly focused on building this diverse and qualified and skilled workforce for Duke Energy's most critical roles. It's important to us that we have this infrastructure in place because it helps us with executing on our business strategy by having the right talent in place, again, to support our most critical roles. These 5 areas I'm going to get into in the next slides, but it's around having strong partnerships, varied funding opportunities. The curriculum piece is really critical, and you'll hear later from Margaret about how we're partnering with her organization. Constructive policies and early talent engagement are the 5 pieces. The very first one, in terms of strong partnerships, regional consortia, community organizations, nonprofits, our educational partners all form this very solid network that really enables workforce development from an external perspective to thrive. Examples for us here at Duke Energy is we have a state and regional consortia, so North and South Carolina, and I'll talk a little bit later about the Carolinas Energy Workforce Consortium and the work that that team's been engaged in. Also at a national level, we are, as a company, we're a member of CEWD, and that's what Ann talked about earlier. Other partnerships in the K through 12 arena, as well as post-secondary education partners, are critical for us. The workforce boards, again, community organizations, particularly those that have a focus on supporting the underrepresented people in the communities that we serve. On the next one, in terms of varied funding opportunities, this work has got to be supported financially. And I shared earlier that we, as a Duke Energy Foundation, certainly make investments, but there are opportunities for other foundations to invest, as well as state and federal funding through grants and workforce development programs. A couple of examples would be tuition-free enrollment or vouchers, for people to attend our community college programs. One such program across colleges here in North Carolina that Margaret will talk about would be for our line worker pre-apprenticeship programs. And so there's funding available through Apprenticeship North Carolina as an example of how we would fund some workforce development work. Another one that I'm exploring currently, in fact, is a grant opportunity through the Department of Energy. They're awarding up to $4 million to the energy sector and through minority serving institutions to support minority education, workforce, and training. And so that gives you an example of just the wide variety and array of funding opportunities that need to be in place to help support our efforts. The third area is around industry-aligned curriculum and training, so training programs at community colleges, universities, through our community organizations, again, for underrepresented people in particular. They help to ensure that we have the right skills needed for the roles that are aligned to the company's needs. One example would be, I mentioned earlier, the line worker pre-apprenticeship program coursework that's available through the North Carolina Community College System and certain schools here in North Carolina. Just in August of this year, we had an energy career pathway actually approved, and so we look forward to bringing more energy related programming to the schools here across the state. The fourth one is constructive policies that promote careers in energy, policies that remove barriers to minority populations, and those that align education to energy careers are all very helpful in enabling successful strategies. One example would be some work that we're wanting to do to help inform state legislation that really affects how North Carolina's early college model works. And so policy is really critical to help and to support our workforce development efforts externally. And the very last one is early talent engagement. And so engaging students as early as middle school in career awareness, ways to explore different career options, experiential learning opportunities, again, all help to build that external talent pipeline. We want to be able to bring this career awareness not only to the students, but also to educators and parents as well. One example of some work we're doing here that I'm really excited about is a virtual reality experience that's going to create awareness not only about how we generate and transmit energy and distribute energy, but also the careers that are related to those three areas. So really excited about that in terms of using that as a platform to create awareness. We're also leveraging energy and relevant pathway programs to provide career exploration experiences for students and implementing skills-based training programs, again, at our community colleges and within our community-based job training programs. So again, that's those are the 5 pieces for effective workforce development, again, with an external focus. And this will take us to the next level in terms of how we actually go about executing on that to build that pipeline through work-based learning. This is really about learning how students learn about work and job opportunities and what post-secondary success looks like, learning through work, and learning for work, again, applying this work-based learning principles. So in terms of awareness, and this is, again, building awareness about the variety of careers available and the role of post-secondary education. It's really wanting to broaden the students' options and giving them exposure to what's even possible and just creating that awareness about the energy sector and the kinds of roles. In the exploration piece, you have the opportunity for students to learn or examine really career options and post-secondary education, for the purpose of motivating those students and to inform their decision making. We have energy pathways, college feeder programs that kind of fit into that space as well. In terms of the preparation piece, so this is the ability to learn through work, and that's applying learning through practical experiences that develop knowledge and skills necessary for careers in our industry. And so things that fit into that space would be like dual enrollment programs. We have a partnership with CEWD where we offer through our partners a pre-employment aptitude testing prep. This could include internships as well as co-ops. And then on the training side, that very last one is learning for work. So very specifically training that will lead to employment and or post-secondary education, but in a very specific range of occupations. And so that also, I think, would be a good example of internships as well as apprenticeships and co-ops. And so I wanted to share this model just to give you an example of kind of, where we focus our efforts in terms of, trying to align the work that we do to build this pipeline through work-based learning principles. The very last piece I wanted to share for my presentation is about the Carolinas Energy Workforce Consortium. This is a group of utilities and contract organizations here in North and South Carolina. It was formed in 2017, and it's a very collaborative, focused effort around building a sustainable, qualified workforce to support the needs of the energy sector in the Carolinas. The vision for the organization is to ensure that we have a sustainable, qualified workforce to support our energy needs, and it was necessary to come together to address this holistically as an energy sector versus trying to tackle these challenges on a smaller scale and individually. So very much collaborative. Our mission is to create this very organized approach to leveraging the resources of government, industry, education, in order to develop these skilled workers for all of our stakeholders. So not just one company benefiting, but all of them. And this is, critical in order to be able to address, the challenges that we face as a company to transform, but also as the energy sector overall. Our objectives center around 3 pieces. That's workforce planning, education, and career awareness. Again, the team formed in 2017 and it has done some phenomenal work in partnership with the North Carolina Community College System, which you'll hear about next. On this very next slide, these are the different companies involved and organizations. So you have, of course, Duke Energy, the North Carolina Electric Co-op, Sumter Utilities. You see the list there on the screen, and so a number of companies involved, and it's a very collaborative and fruitful effort in terms of pulling together and working to in partnership to address our workforce challenges. So I'm really excited about the work that they have done and excited to continue leading this team going forward. So in closing, what I will say is we are, all in this together. Our focus today has been on really the future of employment in North Carolina's new energy economy, and I can't stress enough how important workforce development is for the state. I think preparing for our future workforce is important to all of us, and I look forward to the questions at the end of the webinar today, and at this point I will turn it back over to you, Alex.
Okay, excellent, LaTanya. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you giving us some perspective there on what's going on with Duke Energy and the workforce development framework that you guys are utilizing and implementing, and some of the Carolina Energy Workforce Consortium and helping build the talent pipeline. So we really thank you for that. And folks, if you've got a question or comment for LaTanya, we will be back with her at the Q&A session at the end. Please leave it in the Q&A box. As we move forward and transition to our last guest speaker of the webinar, Miss Margaret Robertson. She's the Associate Vice President of Workforce Continuing Education at the North Carolina Community College System. Her current role includes responsibilities to connect colleges, students, and employers to address workforce needs in high-demand, high-wage positions within the state. She's focused on education, effective processes, and workforce development. And Margaret's going to share information about the community college system and some great examples of programs that are helping close the skills gap, create scalable career pathways, and lead the way to a cleaner energy future. I'll bring Margaret on now, and Margaret, I'll pass the microphone to you.
Thank you, Alex. Good morning, everybody. I'm excited to speak today to this group. I'm interested in the development of an energy workforce and some of the things that have been referenced by both Anne and LaTanya in regards to activities that are going on and really some of those critical game changers happening within this space. Just to give some perspective on the North Carolina Community College system, we do have 58 community colleges across the state serving all 100 counties. So it is a relatively large footprint that we have throughout the state, which gives us an opportunity to really work with employers to see how we can leverage all of those resources to best meet the needs both across the state and then really when we start taking a look at what are some regional needs and where those spaces are. So just some perspective again is we not only have 58 community colleges, but we have a comprehensive community college system, meaning individuals are coming through our community colleges across the spectrum. We have students who are coming through us to receive their adult literacy program. They're working on short-term training credentials to get them into the workplace. Either they are unemployed in that underemployed space, or they're working and they're needing to increase their skills so that they can address some of the changes that are going on, particularly in technology, in order to stay relevant and active in the workforce. And then we have our degrees, diplomas, and certificates on the curriculum side, really ensuring individuals have that bridge across the spectrum of learning so that we can help the citizens of North Carolina move into the workforce in the most effective way that supports our employers. Specifically to this group, we do have a number of opportunities for education in energy and energy-related occupations. And we'll talk a little bit about that here in just a bit. So some perspective on the energy sector, there's nearly 150,000 individuals working in energy generation, energy efficiency, or clean transportation who have participated in education or training through the community college system. So nearly 1 out of every 3 individuals working in that space have engaged with one of the 58 community colleges in respect to the kinds of things they're doing in the workforce. And LaTanya had mentioned this, and it's a really significant shift in how we view apprenticeship and what we're doing with apprenticeship in the state. A couple of years ago, apprenticeship in North Carolina had been operating in several agencies in the state. They've been doing fantastic work. For about 2.5 years ago, the legislators moved apprenticeship into the North Carolina Community College system. What that's allowed us to do is just literally have them down the hallway. So while they were doing fantastic work, this opportunity to really sit next to each other regularly and to figure out how we better collaborate, how we better set structures up to make apprenticeship as an access tool for students and a resource for employers has been huge. Within Apprenticeship NC, they are responsible for the registered apprenticeships throughout the state. We also work with Catherine Costellos and her team on the pre-apprenticeship structure. And as we talk about line worker here in a moment, we'll talk a little bit more about how pre-apprenticeship fits into that whole pathway for someone moving into these kind of jobs. As you can see, we've got about 7,000 individuals and 25 registered apprenticeships in occupations related to the energy sector. And so I've put a few up here just to give you an idea of kind of the variety, but there's a number of others that are out there. There's active engagement. How do we leverage things like apprenticeship to really give individuals that opportunity to grow within jobs? So it's not just about the job today, but that growth within that workforce to see where they're moving and how to retain those individuals to both LaTanya and Ann's points about workforce development is not just about developing the talent pipeline, but really engaging and retaining those individuals and moving things forward. It is, as you've heard already this morning, hugely contingent on sector partnerships, whether it's the national partnerships and speaking of in CEWD or the regional partnership in CEWC. It is really getting all of those entities together to figure out what resources they can bring to the table, how that they can identify needs, and then how do we, with the community colleges, and that's my space, how do we leverage the strength and footprint of 58 community colleges? The 58 community colleges do absolutely amazing job of talking to and working with the employers within their service areas and ensuring that the things that they're preparing individuals for meet the needs of those employers. What the sector partnerships are allowing us to do is to take that great work up another level and say, how do we get some consistency across the state as we're trying to address employers who have needs that really span across all of North Carolina. And so the example that we really wanted to focus in on today is the Carolinas Energy Workhorse Consortium. So Tanya gave you perspective on who's involved in that and where that came from, and it did start in 2017. And it really was not just about a particular job. So I think when we got started, there was lots of conversation about how are we addressing the line worker situation in North and South Carolina. But I think as that partnership has progressed, the strength of it being collaborative, the strength of all of those individuals within the industry coming together to work and CEWD being at the table with them is being able to say, here is our critical issue today, referencing back to Ann's slide where she was kind of showing where those infrastructure and transitioning kind of pieces, where the critical game changers were what was the one that we wanted to focus on in the moment, but how are we going to leverage that into the future? We did begin with the line worker because I think across all of the partners involved, there was a recognition that we had a lot of transitioning workforce in that space, and how are we going to address that between North and South Carolina? In relatively short period of time, so in 2 years, we were able to work as a collaborative and develop that consistent curriculum on what are we doing with an industry-aligned curriculum that is ensuring that what you're getting out of each of the colleges, the employers know what that individual walks to them with, and really being able to leverage against that. So in that period of time, so in 2015, so really kind of taking it back when colleges were literally responding to the local workforce, we had 4 colleges training about 156 students annually. Fast forward to 2019, we have 9 colleges actively up and running, training 445 students. Come this fall, 2019, our 10th college will come online, and we believe that with that college and then a few of our other colleges maturing into their programs, that the gap between the CEWC modeling for demand versus supply of entry-level line workers will be met for the North Carolina space, and a little bit more just given how some of our colleges are ramping up. But those 10 colleges ultimately are all training to that industry-defined curriculum. Every student who's coming out has a baseline of knowledge that the industry can rely on and know what they're getting. The pre-apprenticeship piece of this that has become a critical component has all 10 of those institutions where that training program is a approved pre-apprenticeship, giving those students that opportunity then to get employed with a company that's doing a registered apprenticeship and walking that pre-apprenticeship skill over. So it's a huge advantage to the student. It's an advantage to the employer as they're kind of how are you accelerating individuals through that pipeline of entry level towards a middle skill space. This was just a really great example of industry driving the conversation, collaborating with their educational partners, and being able in a relatively short period of time to really redefine what that training looks like and scale up the amount of training going on in the state. And Alex, I believe we have another poll question.
Excellent. All right, let's do it. Let's take a quick moment, and this is the last poll of the webinar. So here's the question. In the 2017-2018 school year, approximately how many students were served by the North Carolina community colleges? And this is more of a quiz, so if you don't know, just take your best guess. A few seconds here for everyone to select an answer. Approximately how many students were served by the North Carolina community colleges? All right, everyone, just a few more seconds here. We'll conduct this poll pretty quickly, and we'll get back to Margaret. And I know we've got a bunch of folks on the line, so if you guys will, go ahead and just select an answer that you think is the best one, if you don't know. All right, so we've got the majority of people, it looks like, are trying to select the 500,000 answer. And we'll go ahead and close the poll, broadcast the results, and we'll get back to Margaret. Margaret, I'll pass the microphone back to you and ask you to share with us which one is the correct answer.
Sure. So you may be a little surprised, but the community colleges in North Carolina served approximately 700,000 students in the 17-18 school year. So those are 700,000 individuals who engaged with one of the colleges in order to either get some short-term training, move forward in their curriculum programs towards a degree or diploma, to engage with the workforce. And that's been a pretty steady, consistent number the last several years. So I did want to talk briefly about some other spaces within the energy sector that the colleges are involved in. Just to give the participants on the call a little idea, beyond line worker, what are the kinds of things going on with the colleges? So this is not comprehensive by any means, but just gives you some peek into some of the exciting programs going on at the college campus. So at Richmond Community College, they have a very robust electric utility substation and relay program. This is a curriculum program really preparing individuals in that high voltage equipment protective systems in the transmission space. They've been running this for several years. They do a lot of collaborations with business and industry in this space, and producing individuals coming out prepared to work on the transmission system side. Central Carolina Community College has a sustainable technologies program, and you can tell kind of from the image, it really is taking a look at what are you doing with solar, how are you really thinking about building things, looking at sustainability with energy, how is that working in sustainability management, all of those sorts of pieces of that building performance, as we're taking a look at how are we thinking about energy efficiency related to the technologies that are available to us. And in many of these areas, the colleges are doing full curriculum programs. They're also doing short-term training pieces that either give individuals initial steps into these fields or taking individuals who are in the field and enhancing their education. Fayetteville Tech, this is a great example of how colleges are looking at and reaching in and working with their high schools to prepare that workforce of the future. This one around photovoltaic systems is what Fayette Tech is doing collaboratively with high school students, moving them towards jobs and pathways around photovoltaic systems, electrical systems, and residential and industrial facilities. You'll see this in many of the colleges where they're actively working with their local high schools on awareness and access to training in these technical spaces. So as LaTanya was referencing, how do we reach to that new workforce, make sure they're informed of what their opportunities are and where things are moving in electrical and construction type of fields, in addition to lots of other opportunities. So the other part on the diversity side of that we've spoken briefly about is both through the high schools but also through the colleges, access to and partnerships with the workforce boards or groups of individuals coming out of our adult literacy programs. There's opportunities to take advantage of these structures for the workforce of today and really say how can we get to diverse populations, populations who are underrepresented in some of these occupational areas. And then the last one I just wanted to touch base on quickly is Cape Fear Community College's nuclear technology program, that they do a lot of cooperative training with GE Hitachi and Duke Energy, nuclear facilities, making sure that there are a growing workforce of individuals available for those types of positions. So I think it's really indicative of what's going on in the college, that they are reflective of the communities and the needs and the demands within the workforce. And really any place where we can encourage those partnerships, that's the direction we'd like to go. And Alex, I will hand it back to you, I believe, on this slide.
Okay. And excellent. Margaret, thank you so much for sharing a little bit about what's going on with the community college system. It's really interesting to see those sector partnerships in action and everything that's going on there. So we appreciate you covering the high notes there. And folks, in the interest of time, we're going to move forward and share our last slide here on a career fair and get to our Q&A session with our speakers, because we've covered a lot of ground today. So thank you, Ann, LaTanya, and Margaret, and we'll bring you guys on here in just a minute to go through our Q&A session and answer some of the questions that have come in. But before we do that, I'd like to take a quick moment and mention an upcoming workforce development event taking place this month in our region for job seekers and employers alike. And So this is the Research Triangle Clean Tech Cluster who is hosting the Clean Tech Connect Career Fair in Raleigh, North Carolina on October 30th at the McKimmon Center from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. So if you are looking to kickstart your career in the clean energy, sustainability, environmental services, smart transportation, or advanced manufacturing industries, this event is for you. Also, employers with operations in the region, if you're seeking interns, employees, or business exposure, you're encouraged to participate. There are a limited number of exhibitor booths still available. So this Clean Tech Connect Career Fair helps employers get matched with job seekers. So please visit the Research Triangle cleantech.org/career fair to learn more. And now, folks, it's time to transition quickly to our Q&A session with our speakers. So if you've not done so already, please post a comment or question in the message box on the upper right side of your screen, and we'll do our best to try to address it. And I'll start off with Anne, one of the first questions that's come in, so I think this is best suited for you, Anne, getting back to CEWD and the work that you guys are doing. What is the biggest change you've seen in the energy workforce development since CEWD was formed?
Thanks, Alex. Glad to take that one. You know, when we started, there was a real concern about the aging workforce. And so much of our work was focused on, and of the companies that are involved, was focused on how do we build education pathways like the wonderful ones that Margaret talked about that will produce this pipeline of workers to fill jobs for people that are leaving, that are retiring. What we've seen, though, in probably the last 6-8 years is a shift from filling the jobs that currently exist to a focus on what kind of skills are we going to need for the future. So it's a change in terms of filling traditional jobs that were being, where people were retiring, to creating a workforce that can adapt with us, that can learn with us, that can innovate with us. And that includes everything from focusing on diversity to some of these new skills that we've been talking about. So a big change in terms of the work that CEWD is doing, not just building foundational programs, but rather focusing on what is this new workforce going to mean. And you see that reflected in the work of the CEWC and other consortia looking to the future.
Mm-hmm. All right, great. Yeah, and thank you so much to you and your organization for doing the work that you do and helping advance the workforce development and training in our energy industry. We appreciate your time, Anne. Thank you. And I think this question, this next question that we have was best for LaTanya, so I'm going to bring LaTanya on. LaTanya, how would you address this? How is the role of a 4-year degree shifting in the energy industry?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, we see job descriptions every day. I used to work in the talent acquisition organization, leading that work, and inevitably, you know, every job we posted, the hiring manager was out seeking a 4-year degree and tons of experience. It's getting to be very competitive, and the shift that I'm seeing now is a stronger focus on what are the skills that people can bring to the table versus the education. Skills are more relevant to what's got to get done in the job, and so we're seeing a shift in that arena. What I anticipate is, you know, maybe not across the board, but a lot of emphasis being placed on changing those role descriptions and job descriptions and job postings to really, you know, focus on skills versus the degree requirements. You know, also bringing in folks, you know, through our internships and through apprenticeships and hiring right out of high school in some instances if the students have been able to, you know, attain the credentials which of course would not be a college degree, but certainly industry credentials for certain roles. And so we'll see more and more of that happening, as the years progress, but it really is beginning to make a shift as I see it now.
Okay, great. Yeah, and thank you so much for that perspective. Interesting to see that the skills are really increasing in what you guys are looking for as the nature of education and training shifts. Thank you so much, LaTanya, for your perspective with Duke Energy. We thank you. And we've got time for one more question, and we've got to move quickly here. I think, Margaret, this would be best for you to help us address, if we can do it quickly in the interest of time. How is workforce development changing within the community college setting?
Sure. Thank you, Alex. I think largely it's this conversation about partnerships and sector relationships, really having that look with the industry on what are your needs today and where are you looking at for your needs tomorrow. How do we then leverage that with what the colleges can do and have it as a relationship so the colleges can be supported in meeting those needs as opposed to kind of, driving from behind. I think that's really where some of the bigger changes are occurring.
Okay. All right. And Margaret, thank you so much for the perspective going on with the community colleges. And folks on the line, if you need to reach out to any one of our guests, their emails here on this slide. You can revisit the webinar recording at the end. With that, I want to thank all of our guest speakers for their time today and their help with some of the thoughtful responses. And let's do a quick wrap up. Folks, please do help us out. As soon as this webinar is over, please provide your feedback on the survey that pops up at the end of this presentation. As a final reminder, we will send a follow-up email to everyone with a recording of today's webinar, and please feel free to share that with your colleagues and your industry contacts, or if you want to get in touch with one of our guest speakers, their email addresses are in this webinar recording. And we certainly hope that you found value in today's webinar, and thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. Please answer the survey questions when they pop up, and we hope that you have a great day. Thanks, everyone, and take care.